Everybody, just getting the technology right tonight. Let me tell you, there's been some interesting moments behind the scenes here. Hi Jen, how are you? Aristia's previously confessed that she's eating her dinner, which is absolutely fine. I love it. So let's kick off. And I'm starting my timer because one of the things I'm working on this year is time and being better with it. So I really wanted to say a huge welcome back. Thank you to everybody that's come back for day two. It's I know it's a big commitment, right? But I'm really excited that you chose yourself and you've come back and you're ready to sort of continue this journey together. So today we're really going to again be kind of diving into this idea around the power of honesty, right, and intention. So we want to kind of unlock the secrets that exist around aligning with your true self, and not feeling that you have to mask or hide or kind of be somebody that you're not when you're kind of navigating life, right? So a lot of what I want you to be really tuning into tonight is thinking about your own unique strengths. Okay, so what is it that ignites, passion in you? What is it that you connect with that's a part of your purpose? What are your values? What is it that's driving you in life, right? And it's when we really connect to that we give ourselves the best chance of taking the action that's going to bring us closer to that, in not just in real time, but in a sustainable way, right? Because I don't know about you, but I know for a big chunk of my life, I would try, let's be real, I would fail, and then I would give up. And, it was like, but other people don't do that. And I wanted to know more about how is it that we actually take action that leads to sustainable change. I didn't want it to be a fluke. I didn't want it to have to take me years and years of more of my life to figure it out. So I want to jump in, and we're kind of going to work through it. And there's some really interesting concepts in here that I think you'll see how they really strongly link back to last night as well. So we are going to look at what we covered yesterday. Sort of the three large topics we had a look at was the idea that your brain, right, and your mind is holding you back. And that, I'm hoping that, it was a very rudimentary map, right? It was a very high level look at the brain, and there's a lot more detail to it. But I think the important parts that I pulled out for you there was that when you start to understand how it works and why it's working that way, that's when you start to realize, oh, I can actually hack some of that. Okay. And that's where the power is. It's when it's a completely unknown vessel to us, it's a completely unknown operating system, that we are like, well, we're just in that hypnotic rhythm that we talked about. We're on autopilot. And that makes sense. So it's really about you understanding that none of this is your fault, right? Because I'm the one that, I told you I get on my soapbox a bit, but one of the things I'm always on my soapbox about is, why aren't we talking about and teaching each other how to develop this level of emotional intelligence? And, why don't we have ready access to this information? Okay, it's only usually when something really bad happens, or when we find ourselves, maybe we might be suffering from, we might be diagnosed with an illness, we might be, kind of experiencing, whether it's depression, anxiety, our mental health is really, not optimal, that suddenly we start to get some information. And even then, I'm going to say it's the tip of the iceberg. Okay. I'm a really big believer in things like CBT and So cognitive behavior therapy and, acceptance therapy and all of these different things, they're all very, very good. They're all based on research and science. But interestingly, as someone that's also been a consumer of those services for many years, I actually never walked away with any of the information that I'm giving you. I walked away with strategies, I walked away with tools, but I never understood the why I was doing it. What was this actually going to do? What I was told was do this, let's say, meditate, practice mindfulness as an example, and you will feel better. But why? What sits beneath that? Because once we're connected to that, once we have a true understanding of that, that's when we get this beautiful motivation cycle, right? Because we're not born with motivation. We have to create it. And information is a big part of that equation. So we had a look at that, a really quick and dirty look at the brain, okay? And as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about the brain. I love it. I have a love-hate relationship with it because I know it's very protective and it wants to do the right thing by us, but boy, oh boy, does it tell us some fibs. And it often ends up holding us in place. And I know that that place isn't always the best place for us. Okay. So sometimes I get a bit cranky with it, but generally I'm loving on it because when we do that and when we come into a place of compassion, we can really unlock that relationship and get some fantastic results. The second part we looked at was, it's time to rewrite your story. And I just think that's it's an exciting space because I think that you all know your story. It's there. You absolutely know it. Even if I was to say to you, like, what's your passion? What drives you? What are you really interested in? And I'm sure at the moment you might sit there and think, I don't really know, Mel. Right. But I actually believe that within a few kind of interactions, there's lots of little like tricky ways that I help you get into that information, but it's there. Don't doubt that. Okay. It's there and it's just waiting. It's waiting for the opportunity to be released. Okay. You know what you need. You know what you want. You always have. It's just that a lot of those conditions that we talked about yesterday have really sort of said to you, no, this is your lane. So just stay in your lane. And now, let's be real, it usually starts to happen in our late 30s, into our 40s and beyond, where we start to go, oh, hang on a second, I'm having a bit of a meerkat moment. I'm looking around thinking, is this what I want? Is this who I am? And once you've had that realization, I really want to encourage you to pick up that thread and follow it. Okay, because it's your thread, it's your story, and you're going to write it as you discover what's being revealed. And the third part there is this, the overall, the big framework that all this information sits in is something that I've designed called the success alignment formula. So we started to break that down. And tonight we're going to expand on that with the third paradigm shift. We're going to do a bit of a regroup, and I'll go over the whole framework as it's revealed, just as a bit of a reminder. And then I'm going to talk to you about, what some of the next steps might look like for you and really make you an offer. So let's jump in. Of course, as always, if you've got any questions, my Lucy, as part of my team, is sitting in the background there, very diligently helping me. Without her, I wouldn't get very far. So it would be very disjointed, put it that way. So, and I did read the chat last night and I really appreciated the comments. And I'm glad that there were a few aha moments. So in particular, if you had an aha moment, because I did ask you to reflect on that last night, just, and you're comfortable doing it, just drop it in the chat. Was there a particular concept or an idea, or you were like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way? I'd really like to read that, right? When I finish, and I've got my chat set up tonight a bit better so I can kind of see things as they're dropping in. So paradigm shift 3. So when I talk about these paradigm shifts, it's because these are the big, juicy pieces of information that I think can really help you frame up, right? That's what's missing, or I'm doing that part and I feel really good about that. So this might be the next step that I can take. But the butterfly effect is really about this idea of taking action, right? So tonight is, the theme that I wanted to present to you, as you sort of heard me bang on a bit, is that we can talk about all the focus, the recognition, the awareness, all of those sorts of things. But unless we're taking action, we're not going to get anywhere, right? It's why I encourage you, pick up the thread. Okay, we can pick up the thread, but then we have to move towards, like, where is it leading us? Keep going with it, take a step forward. And that is where we really get the opportunity to break free from these goofy loops that we talked about and that you've seen in the demonstration of how the brain works, right? So the butterfly effect, and I'm sure you're like, what is that? That's just random, Mel. But it's not, right? So I want you to just, imagine a butterfly flapping its wings in a really distant forest, so far away from you that you're never going to see it, you're never going to hear it, okay? And just that small, seemingly insignificant action sets off a chain of events. Ultimately, it leads to a really, really powerful storm miles away, okay? And that is the butterfly effect. And it's a concept that I use all the time because it illustrates how small changes can have a really profound effect. Okay, so in our lives, the very same principle applies. We often don't know that. We don't necessarily consider that to be a truth, but like, hear me out, follow the bouncing ball with me, right? Because what we know is that tiny shifts in our mindset, in our actions, in our beliefs can really lead to significant transformation, right? And I'm constantly repeating this to my clients because I'm always saying to them, it's the small steps, the tiny tweaks, and the nice nudges that make the biggest impact. Now, why do I say that? That's my sort of enhancement on the butterfly effect, because it's a combination effect, okay? It's about amplifying what the butterfly's small movement of the wings does. And it's really about acknowledging that the small steps are important, but when we talk about the tiny tweaks, the nice nudges, that's where we start to bring in this sense of self-compassion. And in my experience, that's the secret sauce. Because if you can put your hand up and say, yes, I live with a bully. I potentially have bullied myself to many of my successes. We hang out together all the time, and I don't really like the relationship. Okay, I think if that's a yes for you, I'd like to hear, I'd love you to drop that in the chat because I certainly know that that's often the relationship that we have with ourselves, is that we push and we pull and we really force ourselves to do things maybe that go against our actual alignment, all right? But the small changes that are, like the butterfly wings, it sets off this chain reaction. And what I see is this, I suppose, the beginning of growth in areas that, sometimes I don't even expect, but certainly my clients don't expect as well. I see relationships improve. I see women, and certainly for me, finding clarity around my career. And I think, in my own experience, it was about just coming into that place of feeling really aligned. And so, that idea that I definitely was successful but exhausted, and being able to now feel really successful in my life but aligned is just, it's life-changing. So, the steps of the success alignment formula is about just showing you some of the small intentional shifts that you can work on. All right. And it's not about getting in and, you're not necessarily, you will perhaps sit and go over this over the weekend, and you can do the thinking and you can have a look at the big picture. And then I really encourage you to just step away, because you will find sometimes you'll get to one part and you'll be like, I'm just here. And you might have to sit and stay there for some time while you figure that out, particularly if you're doing it alone. I think, if we go back to the steps of human growth and development, we know that as soon as you introduce, this idea of you're getting the knowledge, absolutely, and then you increase with a little bit of support, you're definitely going to work towards getting the more sustainable results. So, I think that the best part about the approach is that you don't have to stop the whole world to apply yourself, right? Because I know that so often we think, it's a little bit like when you go to the physio, and they give you this massive, or not massive, but they usually give you 4 exercises, and you're like, I don't have time to fit this in. And I get it, right? Because if it's one thing that I know about us all, is that we can feel really squeezed and time poor, and that can lead us to being really tired in life. Okay. But this isn't supposed to be that. This is supposed to be this opportunity for you to just very gently thinking about, what's going on here? What does that mean for me? I wonder, is that an elephant story? And what happens if I apply a monkey to that? What happens if I go into the logic of that? What does that make me feel, right? Is that my lizard, kind of coming up with a bit of a fear reaction here? Why would I be fearful of this? And suddenly you're having this really gentle conversation with yourself, as opposed to, that push and pull, the bullying type relationship, which is, this is a classic. Well, just put on your big girl panties, right? I get cranky because you don't need to put on your big girl panties. You need to be able to understand that this might be hard. This might be really difficult. This might be really, really scary. That's okay. But let's just check and challenge that and make sure that that is your truth, and that's not a truth of the past. Okay. So, I totally understand that time isn't something you find. It is really something that you have to create, right? And I just can't express, like, I'm pleased for you, but I want you to feel really proud about the fact that you have prioritized your growth again for a second evening in, across the week. And, I just want you, I'm hoping that helps you reclaim some of your energy and your time, and kind of leads you to something that feels a little bit more aligned, right? So that's kind of the butterfly effect. Now, I wanted to give you an example of a woman that I was working with, Alicia. She, and this totally, like this, when I saw this diagram I was in the Canva, and I was just like, oh my God, that just so encapsulates the process that she went through. But Alicia was a mum of a special needs child who was actually just, I think was 24 from memory, and was transitioning into independent living. And she was really starting, so this child was an only child, and she was starting to really experience this kind of empty nest phase. And she felt really low in her energy, particularly at work, and she was struggling to kind of find purpose beyond her caring role. And lots of like, if I'm not doing that, then who am I and what am I? What's my contribution? That question about what are my interests? I mean, Alicia was just like blank. She was like, I don't know. Her whole world was around managing NDIS, let's be real. And, they've been working towards this transition for, like in really a decade. And I think what was really difficult at the time when I connected with Alicia was that she was feeling really alone, because she thought that she was absolutely the only one that was feeling that way. And to some degree, because she was living and raising, a child who was living with a disability, I think she really felt that her circumstances were unique, right? Which is a fair call because there's a lot less population wise, right? There's a lot less numbers. And so isolation is common in that world. But, what I want to remind you of is that your unique circumstances are actually not limitations, right? They're opportunities for growth, because what you've learnt through that, there's lots of really rich information and wisdom in there that then helps you understand, okay, well, what is it that I want now based on my previous experiences? And sometimes you'll know that something sits well below the line and you don't want to do that again. You don't want to go near that. That's really good information. It tells you where not to go. Okay. And it really, all of that information helps you to navigate your personal journey. All right. So it doesn't really matter where you're at or what's going on. But I just remember talking with Alicia. So this is obviously post, but she decided to sign up to attend. I ran this event, very similar, in 2024. And to be honest, I think she came in with the thing of like, oh, it's just another event. But what was really, really interesting was that just this one small choice set off this massive chain of positive, reaction and changes for her. So I think at the retreat, Alicia and she certainly told me that she began that process of really recognizing her own needs, and that she was a human outside of that particular family unit. So, and sorry, the other aspect about her was she was, as we commonly know, a woman raising her child on her own. And so it really was this unit of two. She really started to process it. It was quite good. I loved it. And really, she just started setting really small, intentional little goals for herself. And that all that was, honestly, was around just dedicating a little bit of time each week for personal reflection and self-care. So what she did was, out of the success alignment formula, she pulled out of the workbook, she kind of focused on some of the questions that were in there. And I'm just looking at someone's comment. I had to convince myself to stop thinking about making dinner when my daughter was 25. I know, right? And look, I mean, we're laughing, right? But it's also the reality of the conditioned experience that is women. And this, we're bombarded with this concept. We are natural carers, right? Don't get me wrong. We're very good at it. Luckily, for the sake of the earth and humankind, let's be real. But you've made me laugh, Evilly. But there's also limits, right? And we know that there are limits because we get worn out, we get tired, and then we get resentful. And I hate that for us. I really want us to, come into that space where we can look after ourselves. And interestingly, and I think most people that have been through this transition, and I actually know Alicia would definitely talk about this, is that by working on herself, she actually, she's just like, my relationship with her child has just actually improved exponentially, and it's really different, and she likes it. So, there's no sense of lack or loss in there as she sort of, moves through that transition. So, but I tell you that story because I literally, she went on to join the Real Success Academy. But one of the things that I look at this particular image on the screen, and I'm like, I just remember that unfurling of someone that just made this tiny little investment. She was like, it was free. I was like, whatever, she's very honest with me now. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And, she was like, the ripple effect was massive. So, and I put that in there because I don't know where you're at right now. Okay. I understand this is a very one-way kind of conversation in general. But in case you're thinking, far out, like, I'd have to put in all this effort. I'd have to, do these, like spend hours and hours of time being able to do this. I want to say to you that the butterfly effect, that's why I put it there as this big paradigm shift, because it isn't that. And in fact, what I know is that when it is something like that, it becomes incredibly painful for us. And then what happens when we experience pain? Who activates? Our lizard, right? Our fear center activates. And then it, chats with the elephant and the monkeys get involved. And then everybody's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And then it's all off, right? We just, give it up. So we know that to be true. There's a lot of research about why humans actually, fail in a sense to get lift off. And it's because we put too much pressure on ourselves. We try to do all or nothing, right? We go into, I'm going to exercise 7 days a week for 2 hours a day. And then we get to day 3 and we're like, no, I didn't get up and do it. So it's all over Red Rover. Okay. So, these might be familiar scenarios. I don't know. They might be from my personal repertoire too, but I do know that. So yeah, the butterfly effect is a really, really powerful reminder that we will stay stuck if we sit in all or nothing thinking, right? But when we actually go, you know what, I'm going to take some small steps, and they might not be small steps every day in a row. They don't need to be, okay? What they need to be is a starting place, a point of action, and then we just very gently build on that. And we build on that with compassion, because when we feel compassion, right, it's appealing to our pleasure center, not the pain center. Okay, think about it. Okay, if we're compassionate to ourselves, if we're compassionate to someone else, right, that gives us a sense of pleasure. We feel good. We get oxytocin, we get serotonin. All these biochemical reactions happen in the brain. And guess what happens? What we know about that is that if we tune into that and we make that happen, then the lizard doesn't get involved, right? The monkeys at the front are like, oh, this feels good. This feels nice, right? And logic is like, well, yeah, I can see you're like really chilled, you're relaxed, you're feeling good. So we should do that again. Okay. And then that influences that subconscious brain, the elephant. And it's like, oh, okay. So when this happened, I felt like this. And then it creates the true, I'm more likely to be a true story. Right. So this is kind of this, there's an ecosystem happening up there. And if we know about it, right, that's when we get to, like when you hear people go, oh, I'll give you the hacks. And, this is real hacking. This is like, okay, I want to feel good today. Then I need to get myself a bit of a, oxytocin dump, or a bit of a serotonin boost, or I need to wash my cortisol. That's a whole nother webinar. But right, there are ways that, and so say for instance, I'm going to give you a hot tip. If you wake up and you feel, you're not having a great day, or you're not feeling great, right? One of the key things you could do, 7 minutes on the phone, or having a conversation with someone. That can be in person, but often the person that we really want to do this with isn't right with us. 7 minutes. After 7 minutes of being in a conversation with someone that you really value, you love, you care for, you respect, you rate, you are going to get that biochemical flood. 7 minutes, right? And it's not 7 minutes, just like, I'm not even asking you to breathe for 7 minutes. I'm asking you to talk for 7 minutes, right? Maybe even less, because the other person does a bit of talking too. That is like that's a super hack for life. Okay. So, and if you really think about it just for a second, I've gone totally on a tangent here, but if you really think about it, when are you more likely to ring someone for that 7 minutes? It's usually when you're distressed. Yeah. Okay. Now, so, okay, yep, we can use that as a strategy to help us regulate our autonomic nervous system when we're distressed or sad or worried or things aren't going great. But guess what? We can also hack that to go, do you know what? I just feel like a bit of an oxytocin serotonin dump, right? I just want to get it. I just want to enjoy that. I want a bit of a, you do get a bit of dopamine, but that's not the primary purpose of that one. Okay, if you want dopamine, jump on social media, go and gamble, eat chocolate, whatever. There's lots of those things. We can do that. That's really easy to access, hence why we get addictions. But one of the things that, serotonin and oxytocin, just as the two that I'm talking about, they're a little bit harder to elicit, right? They're slower to come out of the gate, so to speak. Dopamine's really, fast and nasty, but we need it. We need it. Absolutely, we need it, but it's very quick and it burns quickly. And then the next thing you know, you want more. Okay. So, but if you want those other things, you can actually go and create that. Right? That's a hack. That's one of the hacks. That's how we can use this operating system and get all of those cute little animals that we talked about yesterday in check and get them to release the thing that we want, right? Which is to feel good, which is to go towards pleasure and avoid pain. All right. So, that's me totally on a tangent. This is how I normally operate. Last night, I was so focused. So I digress. All right. What I want to do now, step 5, I'm going to come back to, but it's all related. And I hope that you can kind of see that, because the reality is that what we're doing over these 3 nights, right? It's relatively high level. I'm trying to give you as much value as I can in a short space of time, right? Because I'm if I'm honest, I want to convince you that you're worth the effort and that you are totally capable of this. Because if there's one thing that I know, it's that self-doubt, Cookie Monster is like, no, just keep staying in your lane because it's worked in the past and it's okay. And it doesn't hurt if you don't get outside of that lane. You're not going to get hurt. And I want to say to you that, the risk is worth it. Like, actually, if we go back here, I mean, no offense to the and I'm looking over here because it's on my screen, but no offense to the caterpillar, right? Like, it's cute, whatever, but check out the butterfly. I'm like, who doesn't want to be a monarch butterfly, right? They're beautiful. They can fly, they go on adventures. People admire them. Like, it's not why we do everything, but we look at them and we think, wow, there's a lot of freedom, in that. But you can also see that journey. It hasn't been without pain, right? And really, really quickly, I don't know if you do know the story of the butterfly, but there is this gorgeous little story that I tell in some other places, but a little boy finds a caterpillar that's turned into, it's cocooned, and he sees it sort of starting to come out into, breaking through the cocoon. And he's like, oh, this looks so hard. The struggle is so bad, right? So he runs inside and he gets this little fine pair of scissors and he just kind of like cuts the cocoon open to help the butterfly. And the truth is that the butterfly kind of dies really quickly, because the reason how a butterfly creates its wings is through the pushing out of the cocoon. So all that resistance and the pain, the difficulty, the obstacle, right? As it's pushing against it, that's when the wings actually grow and they get their strength. And so that little boy learned a very valuable lesson that day. And I use that story in my training. but I love the butterfly. The only problem, I'm going to be real, is that butterflies don't live a long time. So I always just cut it off at the looks beautiful, goes well sort of part of the story. And in case you can't tell, I'm honest to a fault. So now I'm on to this actual slide, and I'm keeping my eye on the time. So control. So step 5. So this is coming back to, it's in this butterfly effect sort of paradigm shift, but we're coming back to that big overarching success alignment formula, right? So we've looked at the other parts, and now step 5 is about control. And when I talk about control, I want you to know that it isn't about, I really had to start distinguishing this with the women I work with, because it's not about the negative version of control, if that makes sense. Because I know we're hearing a lot more in the news and in life about coercive control, as an example, in the domestic and family violence. And that used to be my world. And so I totally get that that's where our mind can go. But this definition of control is like, if you think a little bit more about, say, healthcare, where we're trying to be all about control and choices, NDIS as an example, but it's really about making intentional choices that align with your values and goals, right? And the easiest way that I try to describe this to people is, if we think about the negative version of control, and I think I mentioned it yesterday, it's that, that idea of a stranglehold control, like where we're really trying to squeeze, and it often makes us feel very tense. We're trying to get everything and grip everything back, okay? But what I want you to think about when we're looking at this framework and we're talking about control, because it's not a dirty word, right? And I want to make sure that you get that in terms of the language that we're using. But I want you to think about it in terms of like a dance space, right? So your level of control is being able to say, this is my dance space, and that's your dance space. And I get to choose who comes into my dance space. Yeah. And I get to choose when people don't get to come into my dance space. And that's not just physically, in terms of, like, we could be talking about consent there, but it is also about talking about that emotional consent. A lot of this, when I'm talking about this, I want you to also just be thinking about, we're not going into it specifically tonight, but that idea of people-pleasing tendencies, about if you have any trouble setting boundaries, right? If you struggle with that, there's absolutely reasons for that. But this sense of control is about you then going, okay, so now I know what this looks and feels like. That's the point where you're like, okay, so now I know where the boundary is. And if you know where the boundary is, right, and it's different in every single situation, then you get to kind of begin to establish those and set those. All right. So I really want you to think about, actually, Alison's just mentioning here, been working on boundary setting, wasn't good at it for a long time. It is hard. Absolutely. And, one of the things I'll say to that really quickly, Alison, is I always talk about starting with, really small social experiments. That's what we do, right? When we talk about, those tiny tweaks, small steps, nice nudges, this is an example of that, where you want to choose something that's doable, relatively easy, and low risk. Okay. And you practice and you practice and you practice until, and you just look at the results, right? So that you can start rewriting some of those narratives. And, then that gives you start to feel the reward center kick off, and you get a positive reinforcement loop, and it's more likely to stick. It's more likely to be sustainable. And then you can go for some of the bigger boundaries, right? And it's also about understanding that boundaries have lots of different levels, right? It's not about all or nothing. It's not necessarily about cutting someone off, but it might be just about, how do you navigate the communication in that relationship, etc. But anyway, that's a whole, I love that. That's a big part of what I do. But back to this. Okay, so control. Now, one of the things that we know impacts how we feel about control is the external circumstances, right? Now, we know that there are so many external factors and events that affect our lives, right? And they are are out of our immediate control. We have no influence on many of them, okay? And I'll give you some examples just so that you've really got a bit of a sense of what I mean. So let's think about economic factors, inflation, interest rates, job availability, overall economic growth. All of these things impact our financial well-being and our overall quality of life, right? And we're right in the middle of that being a huge impact, right? It's an external circumstance that's just pushing on all of us at the moment, okay? So that's an example of something that's out of our control and can really impact how we're feeling in life. Social factors such as discrimination, access to education, cultural norms. We've been talking about it, you know, these cultural norms around women, how we should be, what our goals should be, who we should be looking after, for how long, what we should be doing, all of those sorts of things. And our relationships and our overall sense of belonging, right? So again, you know, when we look at whether you're somebody that's, you know, you might be a person of color, a woman of color, you know, you might be a woman. You might be somebody who's living with a disability. You might be somebody that's living with a chronic illness, right? These are all these social factors that the world wants to go, oh, I need to put you in a box. I need to put you in a box. And you're like, no, but I'm a human, right? I don't need to be, I might go into that box if it's convenient for me and there's something in there that I want, but I don't want to live there, right? So these are these social factors that really push on us. Environmental factors such as the climate, geography, natural disasters is a big one. We see it a lot in Australia. And these all impact our health, our safety, and the quality of life that we live. And then you've got life events such as illness, injury, the death of a loved one, or any sort of unexpected changes in our employment, our living situations, divorce, relationship breakups. All of this can have a really significant impact on our lives. And in fact, actually one that I haven't added in there as well, which is becoming more and more, you know, some of the things I'm hearing from clients is, and certainly I have my own experience of it, but it is about adult relationships with children. And sometimes they don't go the way that the parents have envisaged, right? So there can be a whole lot of life events in that sort of box. And then political circumstances such as government policy, law, regulations, all of those things influence our rights, our freedoms, and our opportunities. And the reason, you know, a couple of years ago, I think people, you know, were kind of scratching their heads around some of that stuff. A lot of us who have lived with a lot of privilege, but, you know, I think that it's an election year this year, but we've also seen there's lots of things happening on a global level that are really having a big impact on us. And I get to say that I've had to kind of tune out on some of the news and things like that because I get a sense of feeling out of control because of what's happening around the world, right? And the truth is that some of that doesn't align with my value set. Full stop. Okay. You know, and I'm more than happy to agree to disagree with people, but for me, that's an example of where that is kind of showing up at the moment. And it's why I include it, because it can have a really big impact on your individual lived experience. When we kind of let our external circumstances have total control over us, it can have really, really negative effects on our mental and emotional well-being. And, you know, ultimately what we know is that, you know, there's these determinants of health and well-being, right? And it's not just a matter of, you know, oh, well, 5 of them have to be running at lower pace for us to be not feeling great. What we know is even if just one pillar, okay, is just falling short or it's not feeling as good as it could be, we know that that can have really significant implications, all right? And the truth is that if you've ever been in that situation, you will know when I talk about the ripple effect of how that pushes through the rest of your life, okay? And suddenly other things just feel a bit harder. It feels a bit more difficult. So, you know, we have to be really conscious about are we allowing those external circumstances and other people, like other people can just be our external circumstances, and what influence are they having on our moods and our actions, right? And because really the truth is that we may struggle to take positive action to improve or change our situation because of the influences around us. And we can feel really overwhelmed or paralyzed by the circumstances, which are all totally beyond our control, right? And I think that, you know, in extreme cases, we see that, you know, it can really lead to a sense of resignation and hopelessness. And this, you know, deep sense that our situation is unchangeable and that we are powerless to do anything about it. And the thing that is interesting about this is that, you know, yesterday when we talked about I talked about oscillating between victimhood and survivorship for a period of time. And the reason that control comes up here, and what I want to say is that, and there was a comment in the chat yesterday about, you know, yeah, but just sometimes you just have to be in it because it's really hard and you're doing it. And absolutely, right? Absolutely. You can't, because to do the opposite is toxic positivity. And I do not believe in that. And in fact, toxic positivity was one of the things that it was an external circumstance, in fact, that held me in my misery for probably a lot longer than I deserved. So I have a bit of a, you know, a bit of a bee in my bonnet about toxic positivity, because we can't experience some of these things and then just wake up the next day and be like, I'm on with it, right? Because we have those two, you know, little monkeys, right? We have the emotion and we have the logic. So if, for instance, we get divorced, we cannot just ignore the fact that logically we need to follow the path of what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my new life? If, you know, my house burns down, okay, what do I have to do to rebuild that? What do I have to do to make an insurance claim, right? We have to be able to be in that space. So, and sometimes so that idea of, and I didn't put a slide in here, which I should have now that I've reflected, but so that idea of we can find ourselves feeling like we're the victim to the circumstance, absolutely, because we are. It happened and we didn't control it and we didn't ask for it and we didn't want it. And then we can look at survivor and survivorship in the center. But what I really want you to understand is that, because quite frankly, that's the level of the continuum that we talk about in our society, right? Mental health services, you know, yeah, they're there and they sort of take you to this bit, but how do they kind of help you survive it, right? And get the information, and maybe, you know, you need medication or you need these things, and they put together this treatment plan and all of these things. But how do we get ourselves back to a place of thriving, of flourishing? Okay. And it may not be the same as it once was when we were 20, right? But what does that mean? And what does that look like for us now? So, you know, I say that because none of this is about not feeling what you feel, because that's denial, buffering, swallowing, and that makes us unwell, right? We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. It just doesn't feel good. It constantly activates the pain center. We live from a place of fear. We don't want that. Okay. But while we want to remember that external circumstances absolutely are going to impact our lives, that's the human experience, right? We also do have the ability to control our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions, right, in response to those circumstances. And again, that doesn't mean immediately, okay? But what it does mean is that when we focus on, okay, what can I control? Right? So we're shifting from this sense of, okay, here's the problem. I am the problem. I'm going to be the problem. I'm just going to sit in the problem because the problem's controlling me. When we just start to make very gentle shifts, right? None of this is about radical change, right? This is absolutely about, what can I control in this situation? And maybe, as an example, what you can control is right now, I could ring a friend and talk to them for 7 minutes. And in that 7 minutes, I might use my logic to talk about the decision I need to make, and the answer might come to me, right? Because I've elongated the space between the thoughts and I've got out of that goofy loop for a second. So that person can be that very powerful, I talked about the vortex, or the twirly whirly, and then bang. So we just insert something that allows that goofy loop to take a different path. Okay. So, we think, what is it that I do have control over? And by focusing on what we can control, right, we actually start to build and rebuild our resilience, and we sit in something we call the window of tolerance more easily. It allows us to soothe our autonomic nervous system, because we become more solutions focused and we find ways to cope and adapt to the challenges we face. Now, if you've ever had something disrupt your life, like it's really life-changing, and you might tell people and they say, oh, that's amazing. You're so brave. That's so courageous. And, and there's always this one, which is, you never get sent more than you can handle. None of it is really helpful. But what it does indicate to you, right, is that if you've begun, or you are, or you have, or you're keeping finding your way through that, right, that's a demonstration that you are looking at what can I control, right? What we want to do here is talk about how do we reduce the level of unnecessary suffering. Now, I'm going to admit to you, my decade of disaster, just because of the dates of it, right, it was well over a decade. It was more like 15 years, but decade of disaster is a good alliteration, right? So, but the thing about that is that when I do look back on it now, there was lots of opportunity for me to minimize the suffering, but I was really, I was really stuck. Okay. And I think also for a whole range of reasons, but one of the reasons that I was definitely stuck on the bottom of the staircase of growth and development was because, and I'm being really honest with you so that you can understand, circumstances, sometimes they will influence what we have to do and choose, right? And it was because at the time, we were fighting really, really hard to keep my sister's 2 boys safe. And so my belief was that if I went and really sought the help that I needed to be able to find my way through this, that it would be used against me by the system, because we had some care and protection, child care and protection involvement. So you talk about being fear driven. Like, I hope that's a really clear example for you of like, oh yeah, every day, just waking up and the thought, that elephant, even though the evidence was actually to the contrary, right? Those boys were going nowhere because one, this mama bear was fighting for them, but two, because, it was all stacked towards us. Yeah, we weren't horrible people. We weren't violent. We didn't have a history, all those sorts of things. But that elephant in my head, that subconscious mind was coming from a place of fear, writing these narratives that if I wasn't perfect in my motherhood, then I would lose, and I would lose big time. And I was not willing to risk that. So I stayed on that bottom level as me trying to do it for me on my own. And it didn't work. I survived, right? I survived, but it wasn't until I moved beyond that and I was like, okay. And interestingly, like, I had a lot of this knowledge. I was like the plumber with the leaky tap. It's but the reason that I'm really honest in sharing that story is because, seriously, I had the knowledge. I was a trauma-informed practitioner who was working with people who were having way harder time than me. Right. And I said to you yesterday, I was getting great results. I was really, really good at what I did. right? But I couldn't do it for myself. Okay, because guess what? Particularly that little emotional monkey was like totally invested, because these were my nephews becoming my children, right? They're my sons now. Okay. So I want you to get a sense of that, because even though the logical part of me was like, you can get yourself out of this, you can apply the trauma theory, you can, help these little people navigate through what's going on in their lives. And I did do that with them very well, but I didn't do it very well for myself. Okay. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to just sort of take some notes. It could be like maybe on your phone, but if you've got pen and paper, and it could be in your workbook as well, if you're on a computer, but I want you to just take 5 minutes or so to write down, after we sort of talked about that, what does control look and feel like for you in your life? Okay, so remembering that really nice safe, right? You're wanting to think about that word safe. So if I'm safe, what does control look like for me? Okay, and I just want you to take a few minutes to just jot down some words. You might write some sentences, it's totally up to you, but just do that for me for 5 minutes, just to connect with, wow, what does that actually mean for me, right? I want to kickstart you so that you don't have to think, I want to do this, and then you don't get to it tomorrow. So I'm just going to turn my video off and just let you go for 5 minutes, and I'll come back on when it's time. All righty. How did we go? Um, interesting question, I think. Did anybody find it easy, hard, overwhelming? Lots of different words that you might use. Let me know how you went. So let's have a look at, I really want you to connect with that, because with the idea that we want to really start to connect with each one of these steps. And as I mentioned yesterday, we can start wherever feels right. Okay. Yes, they're in sort of an order, but it doesn't mean that that's exactly where you have to start. You can absolutely, move and go up and through the framework as you need to. But let's move on to the very last sort of step, which is it's the final kind of piece of the process, right? And it's, I mean, essentially, it seems like a really simple question, but I think that the reason that it's at the end is that I really want you to anchor to it, okay? Because it becomes, if you actually think about it, if you move through these steps, you go through 1 to 5, and then you come to this sense where you're like, okay, asking yourself the question, do I want my past or am I ready for my future? Okay. And what's really interesting, if you're thinking about when I described to you before that positive reinforcement loop, that's why we end on that question, or a question of that nature, is because what I want you to do is I want you to feel that sense of, you know what? I do want my future. Okay, what does that create in us? The want to take action, but also the idea that, well, in order to keep going, right, I just go back to step 1. I go back and I recognize all over again where I'm at, because every time you go through this process, this is not a one and done situation. Now, I'm not saying that you're constantly in this ever flow of being in the success alignment formula, right? Because that would be ad nauseum and really horrible. But what I'm saying is that this is actually a real life tool that you can use to connect back into where you're at. What's going on? What do I need? What am I thinking? Where is my focus right now? Right? Okay, I'm really aware of that, but am I taking action? Hang on a second. When I changed this in my life, it revealed this different script, or it revealed this whole manual that I didn't even know was part of my operating system. I'm going to read that. Okay, so, and essentially by doing that, you're moving into taking back control. All right, so this is a really, it's an important question. Okay. The thing that's really tricky about this is that, we need to really decipher the difference between wanting our future and being stuck in the past, because a lot of our problems come from thinking about our past and trying to renegotiate it. We want to rewrite it and we want it to be different. Okay. Now, a classic example is, I don't know, maybe half an hour ago, I said a sentence that, I missaid it. I wasn't clear enough. Okay. I might want to go back and rewrite it, but I can't. It's in the past. I can no more access that and change it, right, than I can the last sentence I just said. And we have to really consider that, because we can find ourselves finding, just spending a lot of time wanting to rewrite that past. I wish I hadn't done this. If only I'd done this. If I'd turned left instead of right. If I'd taken that job instead of that job. If I hadn't done that and I did this, I should have done this, right? But what I want to say to you is that the way that you rewrite your past is actually by really connecting with what you're making it mean. Right? I'm going to say that again. the way that you rewrite your past is by really connecting with what you're making it mean. Now, an example of that, I'll give you one about when our house burnt to the ground, right? We literally lost everything we owned except for 2 cars because, you know, I don't want to be extreme. But I cannot even begin to explain to you what I felt at the time. It was just so fundamentally overwhelming. To be honest, one of the protective functions of the brain is that it has this ability to block really big chunks of time out as a protective mechanism. And I still have, particularly during that decade, I have big chunks of time that are totally lost to me. Interestingly, as the years go on and I'm in a good place and I'm doing the work and, you know, I'm really enjoying all of that, little pieces are really, they're released to me. And we can find that really difficult. But to me, it's actually, well, wow, that says that I've progressed. My brain is like, wow, she feels really safe. So I'm going to let her have a little bit more information about that period of time, right? The brain is just this magnificent, you know, wow, I love it. but as overwhelming as it was, and the fact that that level of trauma has shut down big chunks of time in my brain, I've also witnessed how that experience really changed each and every member of our family forever. And through the grief, what really grew was this deep appreciation that nobody was injured. And that was a real possibility. Everybody got out safely, and that was amazing, right? The other part of that past experience that, you know, I really connect with, but I know that we all do, is that we had each other. And it didn't matter where we lived. We could have been living in a tent. You know, it didn't matter, because what we were really, really quickly, we learnt in a very short space of time was, okay, as long as the 6 of us are here together, we're okay, right? Doesn't matter where we put our heads down, we're okay. And we were quick to realize that material possessions are actually worthless for us. And I think one of the things that I've, you know, when I look at what meaning am I making of that past experience, it's that, you know, to this day, our children are minimalists, and they don't, like, they love lovely things, don't get me wrong, like, and they have beautiful things, but they don't have more than they need. And you know, they have this a lot deeper connection as a family, because we all can very silently look at each other around a table, and we know that we survived something together, and that, you know, there are difficult days still, right? It's you know, nearly a decade, it's 9 years this year. There's still things that I miss. My photos of, like, those 2 photos that you saw in this, literally the only photos I have left, and that was because somebody had them and sent them to me. I miss my wedding rings and my engagement ring. I miss all of my mum and my sister's belongings because I was holding them, and kind of the list goes on. In particular, there was this, like, oh, you know, this pair of pajamas that I used to wear when I was sick. I didn't even know that I used to wear them when I was sick until I realized that I missed them the first time I got sick. But, you know, the list just goes on and on, right? But to be honest with you, I no longer wish that it never happened. Okay. And I think that, you know, it did take time. It's not something that just, you know, again, it's not the toxic positivity. I didn't wake up, you know, 72 hours later and be like, yay, for, you know, lifelong changing, you know, trauma sort of thing. But what I have been able to do is just, you know, move through that, come to that point of recovery, do the work around understanding, okay, well, I can't change that, that happened and how it happened. Okay. But because I can't change the facts, right, of the situation, they're always just going to be exactly that. They're there. But we can really work on changing the way that we feel about it, right? And that really pulls in back into that sense of control. And we want to, just really get into a space where we start to use our thoughts to shift, okay, the energy that we have around something. And so often, when you might find yourself being really pulled heavily into the past and thinking, like I think about it all the time. I do a lot of work with people where, say, for instance, childhood experiences have been really, really difficult. And, it's like, well, if I wasn't in that family, things would be different, right? And, absolutely, absolutely. But you can't change the way that you were raised, because that's your truth. That's what's happened. And you can't change maybe how our parents brought us up, or the way that we were disciplined, or sometimes the mental illness that that they had, whether they got divorced or not, whether our education was perfect. We met people along the way that were horrible to us. We might have been bullied or hurt by other adults and children. There's a whole range of circumstances that we may have been affected by, and they sit there in the past. But I think that to be able to find that space where you can accept and understand that, do you know what? Yes, that happened, but here I stand, right? And I'm like a really, I'm a good person. I'm a better person. And it's about understanding that nothing in your past has the power or the control to be able to affect you in your present. That's not fair. And that's just allowing that level of unhealthy control to continue, right? And we don't want that, right? Because you have a life to live. You have your dreams, your desires, your goals, the things that you want to pursue. And that's where all your energy needs to go, not into trying to rewrite something that you had no control over in the first place. All right. So, just thinking about this concept that the only thing that's currently affecting you is the thought that you're having right now about your past, right? You don't need to change your past to have it affect you differently. All right. But you can absolutely change your thinking about it. And, I'm not going to say that it's easy, right? I'm not making that claim at all, right? And I hope that you know that my own personal journey, let alone my learned journey, tells you that I know that to be the truth, right? But what I know is that all change is hard at first. It's messy in the middle and it's gorgeous at the end. And that is the business that, I'm in, right? I'm like, no way, we're not hanging out in the past, where we're really going to go and find what it is we want, and then we're going to go grab it with both hands and enjoy it, right? Like, enjoy it totally. So let's bring it all together. Okay, I'm just looking at these chats. There's some claps, which is good. I couldn't live with my mistakes easier. They didn't pop into my head as I go to sleep and bring up. Yeah, okay. And look, that whole thing, that rumination, right? That hypnotic rhythm, this is an example. We can see where it generally shows up in our days. It's totally there, and it's like, okay, how do I interrupt that? What action do I have to take to try and really just interrupt the pattern? Because remembering that in itself is a highly developed neural pathway, right? So we need to, try different strategies and experiments to see if there's something that can ease that. along the way, without just saying to you, just journal it and just meditate. And, you know, there's a lot of other things that you can do. So, but they're really valuable tools, right? But they have to be at the right time in the right place. And you have to be really connected to the why, right? Because if I hear one more person say, just meditate, and they don't tell you the why behind it, like what is meditation, and why should we do it, then you're never going to anchor to it. It won't work, right? And yeah, anyway, that's a whole nother tangent, but you got me on a soapbox. But so let's bring it all together. You know, with this kind of idea of what do I want? Do I want my past or do I want my future? Okay. Nothing in your past needs to be changed in order for you to feel better about it, to do the healing about it. All right. To really recover. And, you know, I mean, for some people, there's this sense of finding peace about it. For some people, a process of not forgiveness. Some people, you know, forgiveness is the way to go. For other people, we talk a lot about forgiving it away. So, you know, we give it away. It's not mine. You know, I didn't do it. There is lots of different ways that you can, really just find peace in yourself about your past. What I will say is that you will never eradicate the pain. And I'm hoping, without me even telling you why, that you know, because of our little rudimentary map of the brain, right? So why? Because that reptilian lizard amygdala has consumed all of that painful information and it's holding it in its little repository, right? Because its primary job is to stop you from being hurt again. So it's like, I can never get rid of those past memories, right? I don't know, maybe they're trying to think of some drugs to do that, but that's not where we're at yet. So, but what I can do is know that they're there, and that they'll often put these flags up, particularly if we're really sensitive, and our autonomic nervous system's a bit dysregulated, and we might have extreme levels of cortisol, right? And so we'll find that we're quite trigger happy in that area. So what we then have to do is, again, really come into, okay, how do I make more peace with this past so that I can really just start to change the threshold levels in my amygdala? Okay, so, you know, these things are possible, but I'm not going to say to you that you'll never experience pain around things that have happened in the past, right? I mean, last night I had the most weird reaction just for a moment. I don't know if it was the photos. I'm not sure what happened, but when I started to tell you the story about, you know, just sort of introducing myself, and I was looking at those photos, and I just connected in with something very, very fleetingly, and my voice quivered and I started to tear up, and I was like, what's going on here, right? So random. Because, you know, I mean, it is a part of my story. I don't live in it. But I do explain it to people because it gives you a sense that, oh, wow, this woman actually knows what she's talking about, because she's had some pretty big things happen to her. And so, you know, last night I had that experience. And what I'm going to be honest with you and say is, ironically, actually, Evalie, when I went to bed last night, what do you think I was pondering? I was thinking, wow, why did you have that reaction? Because you tell that story all the time now. One of the ways that I control it is by putting it into the decade of disaster, right? That packaging it up is a control mechanism for me. It keeps me safe, right? It's my dance space. And I go, oh, what happened? You were just telling that story like you told it a million times before. But I think maybe I just connected in with one of the images. So pain is, we can never escape the pain. And that's not what I'm guaranteeing at all, right? But we can really shift our relationship with it. And we can really start to use our monkeys, our logic and our emotion to tune in and check in with our subconscious mind to go, okay, and you know, really quickly in that moment, I just went, hang on, you are not there. That is the past. You are right here, right now, in the room with these women. You know, you do you, right, honey boo boo. And I came right back in. And that was literally like I scooted right to the top of my window of tolerance, and I was like, oh, and then I came back in and hopefully delivered. But that's literally the level of control that we can kind of develop over time. So, you know, I want to just run through kind of what we've covered. Okay, we've looked at the overall picture. You know, there's been 3 big paradigm shifts, right? That really, not only did they sort of transform my life, I've kind of pushed this. It's one of the frameworks that I've used and pulled together through my lived and learned experience. But, you know, and I use this with hundreds of women, right, that I've worked with. And what I know is that you can do the same, right? Just remembering that your brain at the moment is probably holding you back because you don't necessarily have the knowledge that you need to have to be able to understand how to use it. Like, it's like your number one tool. And at the moment, it's totally like freelance. It's stuck in the hypnotic rhythm, right? And a structured approach, when we start to put ourselves in a framework and we're bringing in that knowledge and we're getting the support, that's where you get to consciously design your life, right? And it ensures that your goals are aligned with your true desires, rather than this crap of what are the societal expectations or what does it look like to stay in that lane, right? So, you know, I just wanted you to be able to get a sense that you can really kind of unlock that potential. All right. So our brain. Now, I think I'm hoping you've got a bit of a sense and it makes sense to you. And maybe overnight and maybe today you started to hear or consider the way that the different levels of the brain are operating for you. Like, you know, did you hear anything that was absolutely being driven by fear? Right? Like, and it could be anything. It could be it could be reverse parallel parking. I'm not even joking. If you have tried that before and you're not very good at it, your brain, if you pulled up and you're like, I really wanted that park, it's really close, and then I don't have to walk far and all that stuff that goes, and I'm running late and all of it. And then your brain just goes, but you can't do that. You can't do parallel parking because the last time you did that, you stuffed it up twice and there's a car coming. So just like, no, just walk and be puffed and be sweaty and no, right? That's your fear. It speaks in absolutes, right? You cannot do it. You tried that before and it didn't work. There's a car coming, right? You're going to embarrass yourself. You're going to make a fool of yourself. These are all of the sentences of the instinctive mind, which just speaks in absolutes and drives the fear, right? And so suddenly we go, yep, no, stuff it. I'm just going to go and find a park miles away and pay 3 times as much and be sweaty and hot when I arrive to the meeting late. Our subconscious mind, right? It loves stories. Okay. It loves connecting with ideas and information that we collect along the way. It wants to connect those dots. Right? Remember, it's not a fan of free-floating information. It's like, no, we can't have 2 data points just, you know, kind of out there doing their own thing. I need to make sure that this and this connect. And, I'm not sure what the facts are, but I'm going to do a bloody good job at creating a story for you, right? And so we have to, you know, be really aware of that, okay? And just know that sometimes those stories aren't true and they can trip us up. And our conscious mind is really asking questions using logic, thoughts and emotions and feelings, okay? So, you know, that's a really important part. Recognition, it's not about failure, it's about gaining clarity and control. Stepping in, looking at what am I, you know, what is it that I'm doing? What is it that's working? What isn't working? Okay. this is a place where you really start to get that sense that you want to gain clarity and control. Okay. Now, step 2 is around focus. Okay, focusing on your needs and desires is essential. All right. It enables you to show up more authentically and really, give to yourself and to others. All right. Awareness. It's time to rewrite your story, right? You're shifting from believing that problems are external to recognizing that you are actually contributing to the challenges. Okay. And it's this awareness that empowers you to take control and find solutions that really align with your true desires. All right. So, this idea of scripts and manuals, I think we really covered that well, in that it's about transitioning from living by default scripts and societal expectations to really consciously crafting your own narrative. All right. And the idea of control is that you're here, you're just keeping my eye on the time. My Lord, what happened? So this is where we understand that so many of life's big changes are not by our choice, all right? And that doing this work is a big life change, but this time you get to choose, all right? And you have the opportunity to choose you, all right? So I think at this stage, then we kind of, we're starting to lead back in. We've kind of taken those steps. And the final step that we've really covered here is this need to ask yourself, do I want my past or am I ready for my future? All right. And, I want you to really know that you're not alone in that step. You've got access to, there's supportive communities, there's different resources that can really guide you every step of the way. All right. And it's important that if you have tried to do things on your own, then absolutely kind of take that time to think about, all right, well, what is the support that I need? All right. So I'm going to wrap up there. I am going to wrap up there because I've got a few other things that I wanted to do tonight, but I'm going to bring them to you tomorrow. So a couple of minutes for questions. I mean, one of the questions I want to ask you is, is this making sense to you? Is it something that you at the moment could look and go, yeah, okay, I could start thinking about that. One of the elements here. Because I really want to make sure that you are connecting with it. All right. So I'm looking. No, everyone's gone quiet. All right. Well, what we're going to do. Oh, here we go. Alison says, for me, it's getting better at things I can't control. Yeah. Look, and one of the things I'll say as well is that sometimes some of the concepts that I talk about in this particular training is it can feel quite harsh, and it's a bit like, what? This feels really full on. Like, this lady's just saying some really wild stuff. But it's really important. I think we have to be honest if we want to get intentional, right? And I'm just looking here again. The lesson on choosing my future is very timely. Great. I really want that. And there's always something in here, because we do cover a lot, but there's something that just sparks for people and they go, yeah, that's what I needed to hear. And we've got, for me, it's about being conscious about not living in the past all the time. Look, it's a really big concept that we just don't talk about. We don't talk about it. And you'll hear people say, oh, what will be, and it is what it is. And, oh, you can't change the past. But we still then just automatically go back. And I think it's very much a part of that hypnotic rhythm that we just go back to, like, oh, but I'll try again. I'll try again. I'll see. Maybe if I go back and I think about it enough, and if I ruminate on it enough, something will shift. But it's really about connecting in with those monkeys and kind of trying to, you'll use the monkeys to check and challenge the elephant conversations, right? The stories that's being created, and check and challenge the lizard. So, and Jen says, definitely helping me reframe my thinking and approach. Yeah, good. All right, that's really good. What we'll do is tomorrow night, tomorrow we're going to really be focusing on taking action now. So we've sort of done a quite a big content download, and then tomorrow I want us to focus on, okay, well, what are our next steps? Where are we going, and how are we going to get there? So hopefully that is, oh, look at me go. Yay, that was my timer, because I knew I would get caught on some tangents tonight. All right, so I will say good night. I hope you have a restful night, and hoping not so many of the mistakes pop into your mind. And I will, I really, really look forward. I'm hoping you can all make it tomorrow evening. And so I'll see you then. Bye, everyone.